Hey everybody, it's Kristen. You're listening to the latest episode of Conversations on the Rocks, the conversations that are as random as the thoughts that rumble through my head. But I've got another great person for you to meet today, whom I have known, I believe now we're up to almost 30 years, and that would be the woman who has stuck by me through thick and thin, who is my sister from another mister and mother, Jennifer Filipowski, and she is the bestest bestie that the world has ever known. And if you think you've got the bestest bestie, I'm sorry, you're wrong. Jennifer, welcome to the hot seat. Tell everybody about you.
I have the bestest bestie.
Okay, now we're going to fight.
I have the bestest bestie, though.
Now we're going to fight.
Tell everybody a little bit about me. Well, thank you so much for having me. And I met Kristen in North Carolina, and then I dragged
We've got
her
a cute. We've
Chicago,
got a meet.
like 6 months
we have
later.
the best friend meet cute meet, however you say it.
We actually, I didn't drag you to Chicago. It was a mutual, like, we're moving to
Get
Chicago.
the hell out of Greensboro.
Yeah. And then I dragged you to Colorado.
Again, a hard drag.
And then, yes, eventually we all ended up back in North Carolina for a very long time raising our children, which was absolutely lovely. And then my husband dragged me back to Colorado. But during all that time, I was a marketing executive for a number of technology companies. And I had always sort of dabbled a little bit in politics as far as volunteering with candidate campaigns and such, dating all the way back to Obama's senatorial campaign in Chicago when I was living there. So, because that's where I'm from. But then in 2016, I got really involved in politics and became an officer in the county party in North Carolina. And then when we moved to Colorado, I became the chair of our county party here. I'm also involved at the state party, handling a lot of the technology needs for our voting processes and including the election of our DNC delegates and electors, for instance. And yeah, in addition to that, I am one of the partners of a nonprofit here that focuses on the arts and producing events that promote economic development in our tiny little town of 8,000 some people.
Is it really that many?
Yes.
Well, just back in the day, it was like, well, maybe 500 people that lived there in that particular area.
Probably.
So it's really good. But it's so pretty out there.
Yeah. Nobody lived this far down valley back then.
So when we were originally, let me rephrase that. When I originally was thinking about what we were going to talk about, I believe I put it to you, we're going to talk about the shit show that is happening right now. And then all of a sudden, things changed. Then came Sunday. So we got a whole similar topic, but a lot less shitty showy-ish. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Let's I want to talk real quick. I don't know if you watched it all, but only because I was watching something that would lead right into it. I did watch part of the RNC last week just to kind of it came on after whatever show I had been watching, and it was interesting, to say the least. Did you happen to catch any of it?
I cannot, for my own mental health, watch any of that.
I really wanted to get an idea because at that point it was, the two old guys. So I really wanted to get an idea, especially with 45 going through the assassination attempt. And this is just a really bizarre thing that's going on. It's just, even before President-elect Kamala came in, she, it's just been so bizarre. I will say this, it appears that whoever 45 has on his team that told him to shut the F up and calm down, at least at the RNC, it was just a totally different version of him. And it was still him, Especially on the last night of it, because, and I finally turned it off. I could only take about 15 minutes of that, but it's just bizarre. So, what is your take on everything that has happened up until Sunday? Let's just not jump into Sunday yet.
Not jump into Sunday yet. Yeah, I mean, I think me, and I know that I am not alone. There are a lot of people who have a lot of anxiety over if they're following politics and, at all. A lot of anxiety about this upcoming presidential election. Trump categorically on a lot of different measures was our worst president in history as far as the, policies that he enacted. He's a convicted felon. It's, there's lots of narcissism and threats and calls for violence against, against anybody that doesn't agree with him. And yet he turns it around and makes it sound like it's the opposite.
Yeah, he's a good gaslighter.
Classic narcissist behavior, which has fired up his followers, his cult members, to believe that their freedoms are threatened if the Democrats win. Which I don't know if you've seen our likely nominee Kamala Harris's new ad today. It talks all about Democrats, freedom for, like fighting for freedom, basically, and fighting for our freedoms. So, it is a scary time, and I think a lot of people were feeling despair because even before the debate, a lot of people were feeling despair over the fact that it was the two oldest, presidential candidates in our history, and how could we not do something, better than that? And, quite honestly, in the history of our country, if there is an incumbent, nobody ever runs against an incumbent president. Granted, he had said he wasn't going to pursue a second term when he got elected the first time. But there were obviously a lot of people who voted for him, particularly, as we all know, women of color saved our asses from a second Trump administration in 2020. In 2020. It's there was a lot of despair, a lot of like, I really don't feel like even voting, which would be disastrous, because if people don't vote, then, unfortunately, Trump would win.
Well, and in full transparency, that was me. I wasn't not going to vote, but I was really, and I would not vote for 45, absolutely at all. However, I was really struggling with that whole thing. So when Sunday happened, it was like this rush of optimism and happiness and excitement. I'm excited about it again. I was in the category of dreading. The way I kind of offhandedly put it's like, either of those guys were my dad, I'd be taking their keys away. You can't drive, but yeah, we're gonna let you drive this country. So why do you think, and I have my own theory on this, why do you think it is so difficult to get people interested? You're right. Why were those our only choices? And let's take out the fact that of it being an incumbent, but it's so you don't hear people talking about that they want to go into politics as much anymore, because especially running it up the flagpole to that. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think there are a number of factors as to why that is. One, it is a thankless job, and the responsibilities of the jobs and the time commitment and the amount of effort that you have to put into it is the ratio in comparison to the amount you get paid to do that job.
Right. Don't figure it out by hour.
It's not something that the GA members in North Carolina, and I think it's similar here, is like they get paid less than $15,000 a year.
It's basically volunteer work.
And it is now a full-time job, right? So, like, you can't you can't work in any job because you have to be in the General Assembly for a month and a half, 2 months during a specific time of the year when it's in session. And, so how are you supposed to hold a regular job, which means you've got to be rich to be able to go into politics. And, that's how we've gotten kind of a limited pool to choose from. But if you go back to 2020 when we did have a big field, I think, again, going back to, Black women in particular were all in for Biden, mainly because he showed his receipts under Obama. Not once did he raise any sort of flag or try to contradict President Obama or say, he made a bad call or try to act like he knew better than a Black man just by right of him being a white man. And so I think that endeared him to that community. And, and pretty strongly. Most candidates dropped out before Super Tuesday even. And the other aspect of it is that there was a fear that electing someone who was not an old white man would suffer the same kind of backlash. There's a lot of fear that Trump was backlash for a Black president, that the pendulum, swang so far to the other side and did a lot of harm then to those communities. And so we better go back to electing old white guys. And Biden was the oldest white guy.
Literally.
The other aspect of it is psychologically is other people go, well, who can win? And we think too much in our brains about who do we think can win the election. We're not thinking, who do I want to win the election? We get more concerned about, who do I think everybody else is voting for? So there was a great phrase that Elizabeth Warren had during her campaign. It's like, she'll win if you vote for her.
Right.
Yeah, which is similar to, I still have a little bit of reservation about Vice President Harris, and that was one of the reasons I was worried about Biden stepping down. It was, it was like, look, you're not voting for a person, you're voting for an administration.
Right.
We're already going to be voting probably for an eventual President Harris because I doubt he would make it through his next presidency. And so basically that was where my brain was. Like, if I'm I'm obviously voting for Biden, but I'm not voting for Biden. I'm voting for all of the people that he has brought into his administration who are all very smart, very talented, very qualified people, as opposed to cronies and donors and whoever can stick their nose the furthest up his butt. I'm voting for Vice President Harris to be ready to step up if he, has to leave. And I think that might have been what was going through their brains as far as like, oh, well, we've got to, when they were trying to, getting the calls to step down, like, we have to win. It's our, democracy depends on it, our republic. And so let's get him elected and then he can resign. But I wasn't in the room. I don't know, even though everybody, once you get elected to a position in the party, everybody thinks you have inside information.
What?
Did not. It's all speculation.
No secret hotline. And that's it's so true. And I was explaining that to Mackenzie. I said, it is, and even before all of it, I was like, he did the right thing for the party. He did the right thing for the country. And for that, I feel like that was a big move. And of course, on the other side, they're all ready. I think I speak for every literal person in the United States we're just so sick and tired of it. It's exhausting. It's toxic. We look like a third world country to everybody else in the world, and it's just, I don't understand why people just can't get it. And my dad taught me that at a very young age. He goes, the president doesn't have that much power, because you need to look at everybody else around him. That's where you need to focus your votes. And which probably, I would have done had the race continued in the way that it would, is I would have devoted all my time researching those, as opposed to, okay, I'm not going to let my party down. I can't. I would never have voted for that other one. But what are let's talk about Kamala. Did I say Kamala?
Kamala.
That's what I thought. So let's talk about her. Vice President Harris.
Let's talk about Vice President Harris.
You said you had some reservations.
Yeah, I mean, she was one of my top choices in 2020 during that primary. I have been to an event and heard her speak. She's great. I love her. She's got a very dynamic personality. She's super nice. She's funny. She's professional. She's authentic. And I will be absolutely thrilled if she becomes our next president. I have, again, reservations, though. I was so excited for Hillary to be our president. And then the kind of depression and the letdown that happened right after that was, was really, really, really rough time. So I don't want to, I feel like I don't want to get my hopes up and then have them dashed, because we still live in a very racist, very sexist country. But I am heartened by all of the enthusiasm and all of the memes and all of the, the injection of hope that it's put into people like you and into young people. And, there's tons of people who think it's a great thing. And so we just all need to get out there and work to get her elected despite the odds. And I know just for us, we have gotten the number of volunteer inquiries that we have gotten over the last 4 days has been a great sign that people are energized and ready to get out there and make sure that she gets elected.
Here's the thing that I honestly have a big fear of, and that is on the other side. These people are loose cannons. They are, and I am actually, if their person doesn't win and we succeed and win, I am really kind of scared as to what's going to happen.
Yeah, no, I'm right there.
I mean,
with you, for sure.
You need to keep those 2 downstairs bedrooms empty. And I will be on the next flight. I'll figure something out to do with my dogs. No, but seriously, it is something that I'm very concerned about. Especially with one of my children living in Washington, D.C.
Right.
These people will go off unhinged if a black woman is our president.
A black
Asian woman who has no children.
Yeah, no, that is definitely very scary. I mean, January 6th was just shocking. And made us look like a third world country.
It's like it brought back to mind when we were going through COVID. I think my favorite meme about COVID was that Canada has to feel like they're living in the apartment above the crack house. I mean, it's just what it looks like. And, these people don't care. They do not care. I had, unfortunately, we went to go see, it wasn't Independence Day, but it was some movie that we didn't think ended up being what we didn't think it was going to be. And that movie disturbed me. It disturbed me because it was just it was art imitating life, or life imitating art, whichever way you want to do it. It wasn't
Independence Day
Independence Day. It was we just went about a month and a half ago. I can't remember the name of the movie, but it was. We thought it was going to be an Independence Day kind of movie, and it ended up being like a whole secession, and it was very disturbing. It was so disturbing, and you know me, I'm pretty
Wow.
I'm pretty tough when it comes to that stuff. So I'm just terrified that something like that's going to happen because these people, like I said, these people are unhinged, and they don't care.
Yeah, I know. As far as movies go, a lot of people's brains, especially once Hulk Hogan took the stage, was to Idiocracy.
I didn't see Hulk Hogan. I really, really liked the guy from the Teamsters. He gave a really, really good speech. And it was interesting because I'm sure he ticked off a lot of people in that room because he was going straight down the middle. Because he's like, it's not my job. He goes, I don't care. He goes, I'm not here to piss anybody off. But it was just interesting if you go and listen to his speech. I'm sure these people were like, we like big companies. And, his whole thing was like,
Well, not only that, the Republicans try to shut down unions every chance they get. So I am surprised they even invited somebody from the Teamsters to
go
be
check
there.
out, go find his interview or his speech. It was a really, really well done speech. But
Okay.
yeah, for me, and then Kid Rock. But you saw by those people and whatever Lee Greenwood or whatever, you could just, it was very well orchestrated to hit their audience. It was their target audience. They were going to appeal to their target audience, and you roll out some wrestlers and wrestlers and things like that, and it's going to make them all America.
Right. Well, and to that, I've got to give Biden credit too for waiting until after their convention was over, so that now now the other guy is stuck with this vice presidential candidate who served a different purpose while Biden was still the one running. Yeah, I mean, my fear with Biden stepping down, in addition, I was so sick of having the conversation, and I would try to talk people off the ledge by explaining that part about you're voting for the administration, you're not voting for the person, and so think about it as if you are already casting your vote for Vice President Harris, because if Biden steps down, the only person that it can be is Vice President Harris. And I was nervous that there would be other people, other white guys in particular, who would be stepping up thinking that they could then come in and somehow take the nomination. So I was worried about Vice President Harris getting leapfrogged and that upsetting, all the people who are anti-racist in addition to all of the people of color. And turn off them and make them not want to vote, have our convention be a, circus sideshow of multiple votes. And, ironic that it's in Chicago, considering that the last time we had a disastrous Democratic Party convention, although I guess I could argue that the Bernie Hillary one was pretty disastrous. But the last one, the big one, was in Chicago. In 68, so that should make it it should be interesting.
There was something, it may have been yesterday after his speech, they were doing that, they were showing all the different parallels between 68 and this year, and it was just like, whoa, it's like a time capsule. No. So I'm glad that it seems like Vice President Harris has locked up all of the delegate votes and all of the roll call. Technically, she will be the nominee before the convention even convenes, because the roll call and the actual delegate vote casting happens now. Like, my delegate who lives here in Eagle County, he put in his vote today. So, yeah, I think the whole timing of it, you can't tell me it wasn't orchestrated. It was.
Oh, what? Well,
I mean, the whole thing. Yeah. Everybody, the Republicans being on such a big high from that party, and now they're scrambling. They knew they could. They knew they could beat the old white guy, but now they have the old white guy. So it's totally different. But I will say this. I'm not saying that I like him, but it was a very smart move on Trump's part to choose JD Vance or someone of that.
You think so?
That age. I think because, and that's what we need to do. That's what we need to have some of that youth on the Democratic side. So yeah, it's nice now we've got someone that's going to be our candidate that's 2 decades younger than the Republicans candidate. But that's what we need. We need that youth. And Gen X ain't standing up to do it. Hell no. We're like, shit, no way.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Y'all just fight amongst yourselves.
Who do you like for vice? Who do you like for vice president? Who do you want to see vice president?
I love Roy Cooper. I love Roy Cooper, but I don't think it's him. I don't think he's the right choice. I really like the guy from Illinois.
J.B. Pritzker?
Yeah,
really?
But I also, and so we've got him, we've got Cooper. I think the one that she should take is probably the guy from Kentucky.
Cher? Okay. Why?
I think.
And why don't you think Roy is the right one?
He's not, well, he won't get the North Carolinian Republican votes for sure ever because the Republicans hate Roy Cooper. I don't know if he's well, maybe he's kind of calm and complacent, which might be a nice balance to her charisma. I don't know. You know who I really wish it would be, but he's way too young at this point, is Jeff Jackson.
Yeah, Jeff Jackson will probably go far. All right, so why do you think for Cher?
I think it's more about his location. It's about, being from Kentucky. I think that's I think it's a redder state than they think. They want to say it's purple, but I think it's a much redder state. That I think it's a more middle-aged, middle-income type vote that she's going to need. That's just and I haven't done too much research on any of them. Obviously, I know Roy from living here, but
right.
Just demographically. And then I've seen the guy from Illinois. He just seems kind of cool.
No, JB is very cool. I actually know JB. He and my brother would hang out back in the day a bit. So yeah, I like JB. I didn't even realize he was on the short list at this point. I like Cooper because to offset our Black Asian fireball, definitely need a white.
Absolutely
white
has to be a white guy. It absolutely does.
And his older he has experience, he has experience working with a supermajority General Assembly and actually still manages to get stuff done. I don't know that North Carolina is in a situation where it will help with the electoral votes. What I've heard from some folks is that there's 4 states that are really going to make the difference as far as the electoral count, and that's Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Georgia. So I think also with Vice President Harris being from California, that having somebody in the Southeast would be helpful and might help with Georgia. So that's another reason that I like Cooper. He's one of the ones at the top of my list. I think she's probably going to have to pick Shapiro, actually take that back. She might have to pick Mark Kelly, although Arizona isn't as, I don't think it's as much in play, but Mark Kelly checks off a lot of those boxes of military and law and order.
Oh, yeah. His wife
almost
died. That's right. I forgot about him.
And an astronaut. And,
and they were saying that those boxes that he ticks off, especially when you get to NASA and the astronaut, it's like everybody wants to grow up to either be president or an astronaut. Exactly. So, some of these folks that are on the fence, which is really who she has to go, who they really have to attack. And, unfortunately, after that first debate, I said it to my mastermind girls, and who were there. You and my friend Sarah would get along really, really well. She's up in Vermont, and she's an DEI expert. But I was like, as much as it pained me to say it after that debate, I was like, for a lot of people that were probably sitting on the fence, unfortunately probably fell on the wrong side of the fence so we really have got to get those people that are really teetering. And I agree. I think somebody that I forgot about him. Yeah, he's cool. I like him. And I think he would appeal to a lot of people. I think he would. Maybe that's my problem with Roy Cooper. I just don't think he has the same appeal. He's very safe, like you were just saying. The guy's an astronaut. I mean, I love Roy. I got to meet his wife last year. But I think
Roy's not an astronaut.
No, Roy's not an astronaut. The other guy's an astronaut. Roy's definitely not an astronaut.
Well, and that's the thing, is I don't think Governor Cooper has the name recognition in the rest of the country. I think Mark Kelly has the most out of those four. Unless you're from Chicago and you know the Pritzker family, obviously, since that's Hyatt.
Yeah, I think he definitely could win some of those undecideds that are sitting on the fence. Be like, cool, he's an astronaut. What else? We're wrapping up on 30 minutes. So what else can you tell us that we need to be looking for? What's going to happen next? We've got the DNC coming up. And
DNC is coming up.
What did I hear something?
I think the one thing that I
was going to say, did I hear something that there's not going to be a debate between Trump and Harris? That he doesn't want one or something? Of course he doesn't.
He doesn't want. He's walking back. He knows that she would clobber him, run circles around him, literally, and. I think also that the fact that Vice President Harris is a little bit of a the coconut memes being a perfect example. She will say what she wants to say. She's less scripted, I guess, and less reserved. Whereas I think in the debate, for instance, between Trump and Secretary Clinton, that she was playing it cool and didn't really go after him. Biden would do the same thing. I don't think that Vice President Harris would hesitate for a second to come after him and call him out. And so he does not want that, obviously. So yeah, he's tried saying that ABC shouldn't, or CBS or whoever was supposed to host it, is biased, and that instead it should be hosted by Fox, who of course isn't biased. Whatever.
Not against him. Not against that.
But yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I learned after in 2016 was that we're stuck with a two-party system, for better or for worse, probably worse, because the two-party system just perpetuates itself and is set up to do exactly that and not allow third parties to come in. And so you have so many people, like the majority of the people in this country are now unaffiliated. And what that does, unfortunately, is the folks who aren't a member of the party, let alone actually involved in the party, going to meetings, going to your local meetings, connecting with other Democrats, becoming a precinct organizer. Those folks have a lot of power because they're the ones who elect the leaders of their county and of their state. And so if we're all not involved, because the party is not like this thing that's like, there's no conspiracy theory, there's no big meeting room. And this goes for both parties. There's no, it's all volunteers. I mean, I'm a volunteer. Everybody's a volunteer except for maybe a few people who are at the state level, depending on the state, obviously. But for the most part, everybody else is not paid. We're doing this because we don't want to leave it, our party, to the crazy people. Like, if you're not involved, then you get the people who are, if we don't have more people involved, then it's the people who have the zealots and the ideologies that lean too far one way or the other, who then are the ones making the decisions and picking the nominees and picking the people who are leading the state party, who are then electing the delegates who are going to go to the national convention. So, I would just encourage people to get involved, call your county party, attend a couple meetings. I know it's scary, but knock on some doors. They're not going to send you to doors that are going to be, someone who's not going to agree with you. I mean, every door I've knocked on, people have been, receptive and happy to see somebody from the party, because the other complaint is, well, I never hear from you unless you want my vote. Well, you are actually me, and we could all be doing this together, and that's what we should be doing. I think that we do a big disservice to our children. We teach them about, the three branches of government, but we don't teach them about politics and the importance of the parties and how the parties operate and how our elections operate, because that lack of education has led to a lot of fear, a lot of misunderstandings, a lot of false assumptions that, somehow our elections aren't secure.
Well, and I think something too, and made this comment to somebody the other day, is your far left and your far right are the loudest. The people in the middle are the biggest, right? And I think because what people that are in the middle are focused on is how loud the two sides are, the left and the right, the far left and far right. And that it's just like, well, I don't want to get involved in that. I don't want to have to deal with that BS, blah, blah, blah. And so, but that's why, another reason why it is so important to have the common person like us in there to, help with that and go, and we don't have, okay, I'm going to ask you real quick and see if we can do this real quick. Talk to me about the Project 2025. Because I don't understand. I do, but I haven't taken the time to sit down and really dig into it.
Yeah, so Project 2025 is a blueprint, 920-page document that the Heritage Foundation developed with a number of authors for what their vision for America is. And that includes, eliminating the Department of Education, nationwide abortion and birth control bans, changing this, like being able to basically fire every single civil servant, so that all of our federal and state agencies are populated with, whoever bought their way into the position, through either, whatever cronyism. Right now, a lot of those positions are protected to a certain extent by law, that, it's hard to fire somebody who's working for the government without some really good cause. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of scary things in Project 2025. I'll send you a video and a couple summaries that you can look at. But basically, it was written, and the reason that it scares me as far as why I think it's real and why it would, it is totally their vision and that they would start enacting it, is because some of the things have already started to happen, number one. But number two, the same group of folks got together and put together the plan for gerrymandering, like for going at these low level, like school board meetings and city councils and taking over those boards, and then getting all of the district lines gerrymandered in such a way that, North Carolina is purple, but you wouldn't know it based on the way our representatives get elected, because it's been gerrymandered so bad that Democrats just can't even win. Like the legislature is choosing their voters as opposed to voters choosing their legislators.
Yeah, it's intense. It really is intense. And, without knowing enough about it, I didn't want to even pretend to speak on it. But so we are going to wrap up. This has been an extremely enlightening and delightful conversation. And I'm glad Sunday happened. And it's going to be exciting now. But I think it's going to get really, really nasty again. Probably nastier than it did in the last election. And, oh, man. People, just stay in your lane. Seriously. All right, friends. Until next time, may you have a delightful evening, day, afternoon, whatever it is, what time of the day it is for you. And as always, thank you so much for being here. As the saying goes, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. And that's a wrap for this week's episode. A big thanks to my guests for sharing their story and to you for listening. Don't forget to share the show with your friends and spread the words. And if you'd like to be a guest on the show, the link is in the show notes. Till next time, cheers.